It's the Full Force Comics Burst, brought to you by Distant Planet Comics and Collectibles, with me, Diagnostic 80, and toy photography genius Brian Hickey. Today we are looking at G.I. Joe issue 6 from Paul Allor, Chris Evenhuis and Brittany Peer. Let's do this. A mission to smuggle vital intelligence to free Canada goes sideways when Fadeaway confronts someone from her past working in Cobra. The bonds of friendship are tested when lives are at stake. The results of this mission will have drastic and far-reaching consequences for both Joe and Cobra. Brian, my goodness, it's been ages, mate. How are you doing?
Been way too long. It's great to be back. And great to have comics to read again.
I know. I really thought we would, like, when we hit 50, and I think it was the second issue of ROM. We still haven't had the third issue of that, by the way. Then I thought is this gonna be the last comic we ever do? And thankfully,
we actually had that conversation.
Yeah,
we thought this could be it. This, it's doomsday, global pandemic. It's like something out of an Eric Bradbury novel, and comics are going to go away, but they didn't, which is great. And here we are, back in the saddle. G.I. Joe number 6. Happy days.
Big time. So obviously, this is the Paul Allor series. As everyone knows, IDW kind of had to furlough loads of staff and had to, they kind of basically made all of their G.I. Joe, and, well, not just the G.I. Joe, but a lot of different staff have to put pencils down on certain stories. And it was all very doom and gloom for a while, and then kind of out of nowhere, it was just back in the game again. And now we're getting flooded almost with comics, which is great. Like, I'm not going to complain about that. So this issue, we've actually had this in our possession for a while now, because obviously it was ready to go a long time ago. It obviously got, like I said, it got held up. We managed to read it ahead of time, so thank you for that, guys at IDW. And what an issue! It's a pretty impressive issue, isn't it, Brian?
I mean, this series just goes from strength to strength. It's, we've said it every single time we talk about a new issue from this series. We say the same thing. It's some of the best comic writing and artwork that's out there right now. And I'm reading a lot of comics from inside the Joe universe and outside the Joe universe. This really is not just a great G.I. Joe comic, it's a great comic, full stop.
Yeah. And
this particular issue, which we're going to dive into, it goes into a dark place. It's just magnificent, a magnificent piece of storytelling and character development.
What I liked about it was the fact that it's not too complex in its story, really. It's pretty much the team that are going through like a post-mission briefing with Scarlet. The team involved are Frontier, Fadeaway, Tiger, Jinx, and Roadblock. And yes. Is there anyone else involved in that team?
That's the core team there. That's the core. So those guys make up the core team.
Yeah.
Usually there's some support from the likes of Stalker or Scarlet, but they're really just reporting to Scarlet in this particular post-mission debriefing.
And obviously during that we get the flashbacks to the mission. And one thing I'd like to point out immediately is that style of train they've used is so beautiful. It's like that kind of it looks very much like that the Mallard train, like in the if we've got any train enthusiasts on the show. My granddad was a massive train fan, and he used to build incredible train sets and all sorts. And the Mallard was one that I was just to really love. Like, I used to kind of really just adore that shape and design and everything. And I love this kind of, it's like there's a weird like Art Deco to this particular design with this particular universe that we're in. It kind of mixes future with these weird vintage things, very much like Batman. Was it Batman the animated series did, where you've got like these like definitely cars that look like they're from like the 20s, 30s, 40s, and in actual fact you don't know what the time period is.
That Art Deco, liking the style of Art Deco is really, really observant. The color palette, that Brittany Peer brings to these pages.
Yeah.
Definitely very Art Deco in terms of its inspiration. So that's a nice call out there. And to see this kind of retro Art Deco train and in the opening panel, that's, it's just tying that whole visual universe together really nicely.
Yeah, totally. So the mission is a simple one. They have to get on a train. They get on to deliver these kind of, basically they're kind of incendiary devices that can burn through bats' hulls, because these battle android troopers are causing all sorts of issues, and they've developed this kind of, this new incendiary device which can kind of cut through, and they're trying to deliver those devices to over the Canadian border, and they have to get on a Cobra train, which they managed to do because Fadeaway has developed some tech to get past Cobra in like these Cobra ID, I guess cards. Well, they're not cards, are they? They're kind of like little iPads basically that they have to scan. So they're managing to kind of to basically get past Cobra to get this mission completed. And obviously during that mission, Fadeaway comes face to face with someone from her past, because Fadeaway is an ex-Cobra agent, which I always forget. I think that was mentioned early on, but that's something that I'd completely forgotten until I read this issue.
Yeah, I mean, we've known, I think, from pretty much day one that Fadeaway is ex-Cobra, but it's only until this issue that we actually start to get a little bit more intel on what her role was when she was in Cobra and how she managed to kind of to get out of there.
And what's interesting is her friend, who she bumps into on the train, they basically have this little back and forth where she's like, you've got the wrong person, and so she kind of, oh sorry, my mistake, and walks away. And as she kind of walks away, Fadeaway kind of follows her into the into an empty cart, and they had this little kind of fracas. The Cobra agent tries to kind of call an alarm on it. Eventually it kind of fizzles out into nothing, and they just sit there and they have this conversation, and they basically talk it out, and Fadeaway effectively gets her friend back on side with her, doesn't she?
Yeah, so we have this whole sequence here where Fadeaway gets made by an ex-colleague, tries to play it down to deny that, you've got me mixed up with someone else, can clearly see the ex-colleague is not buying it, and follows her presumably with the explicit intent to actually take her out.
Yeah.
Because it's obviously it's a risk to the whole mission. And when she gets in there and they struggle, they try to set, that Tracy, the Cobra personnel person, tries to set off the alarm, but they come to this sort of kind of standstill in the struggle, and that's when they start to talk. And you can see that it's, Fadeaway doesn't want to kill this person, and she's curious. When Tracy says to her, "Look, oh, so it's true, everything they said about you after you left. I didn't want to believe it." And she, Fadeaway's curious, like, what did they say about me? And that's when we get this backstory, very briefly. She sabotaged her tech team's research, erased all the records of her own existence, and, as Tracy says, left me behind.
And I like how she says she faded away. So, like, that's kind of how the code name comes about, which is interesting as well.
It ties a lot together, and you get a sense that, in the debriefing, Fadeaway tells Scarlet that, she didn't really know this person. They had nothing in common. But when you see Tracy and Fadeaway, conversing, you get a sense that maybe, the friendship ran a little bit deeper, for sure.
Totally. What I did like about this is that funny little side bit with Tiger, where he's having a conversation with that Cobra guy, and they're talking about like how his goldfish is called Paws, and he's like, Paws? He says, yeah, I read that Jaws is the most common name for a goldfish, so instead I went with Paws because goldfish don't have paws, so like it's ironic. And he goes, sure, but goldfish don't have jaws either. And he says, I actually think they do. But he's like, at the time of having this silly conversation, he's downloading, he's basically taking information from the guy's laptop, which is open, and kind of distracting him so he can do it and, get all the information he needs off this guy's laptop. So it's a really funny little thing that just thrown in there as a little joke. But I thought it was quite cute.
So we can see that whatever this Cobra guy is uploading to his from his laptop. Tiger is obviously hacked, or presumably using some sort of device that Fadeaway has kind of supplied, and he's downloading this information to a USB key. And at this particular point in the story, we don't really know what that is just yet.
Yeah. And the next scene is actually really interesting because there's a lot of vibes that I get off this particular, jumping from the train from the bridge into the water. We've seen similar scenes like this when Frontier was escaping the Vipers in an earlier issue, like way back, and he jumped off the bridge and they had that really gorgeous kind of 3-panel type thing that Chris Evenhuis did, and it looked really cool. But I get real vibes from the cartoon on this one, and I know they probably weren't thinking about this, but I think of things like Worlds Without End, which is an episode of the Sunbow series where Flint and Lady J are thrown from a train in very similar circumstances. And it just had I had big vibes of that. But obviously they escape the train over this bridge. They all jump off with Fadeaway's new friend in tow. They hit the water, and which is freezing cold, but they have some, they have reasons why they don't die in that water, don't they?
They've got their cold weather undergear, and they've prepared for this mission. So, as in the debriefing, Jinx informs us that they did a lot of prep and a lot of training for this particular mission, and then part of that is that she references that they, even with their cold weather undergear, it was still tough, but at least it helped them to get through this. And of course, Frontier is down in the river with a little dinghy, and they're hauling. They all get hauled into the dinghy, presumably to move on to the next phase of the mission.
What is interesting as well, I noticed, is that they're talking about, we were all prepped for the mission and everything. So you see Fadeaway, you see Tiger, and you see Jinx all hitting the water perfectly, feet first, kind of all at the angle, the perfect angle, and then you see Tracy's kind of like falling in sideways on a side all over the place. Obviously she hasn't been training for the mission. She just jumped from the train and landed how she thought she was supposed to land, and it didn't work out great in that sense. But yeah, they go to the next part of the mission, which is this little cabin, isn't it?
Which is just on the the border, or just over the border with kind of Free Canada. They have their cargo of these special devices which they have to transport, and then we get a little bit more, I suppose, we get a little bit more detail on the actual mission itself as they kind of get a chance to regroup and inspect what's in these, what's inside these kind of watermelons that they've smuggled.
Yeah,
disguised as kind of rations, on the train.
And what's interesting here is we get like you say, we get more information about the mission, but we also get more information about Fadeaway and Tracy's relationship. And as they're kind of like getting a bit more kind of, as the friendship is kind of reviving a little bit, shall we say, and as it's kind of turning into more of a relaxed conversation and more of a closeness is starting to come back again. In comes a smoke grenade, and they're all attacked by Vipers, which have traced them there because she had a device under her skin, a tracking device.
This is there's a lot happening in this. It's going to be very difficult to cover kind of everything from the time they hit the cabin to the time they have to flee. There's loads going on in there, but obviously we have this moment where the two friends who are reunited are enjoying a moment of peace, and it's literally the calm before the storm. And that peace is shattered with this smoke grenade crashing through the window, glass spraying over the two of them. A Viper kicks in the door, and Frontier, there's no words here, Frontier
shoots him in the face. Yeah.
Shoots him in the face.
Wow.
It's so visceral. They barricade the door, and they set off their perimeter defenses, which annihilates the bulk of this kind of Cobra squad that have tracked them to this particular cabin.
Roadblock's looking a bit tasty now as well, isn't he? Like he's shooting, running backwards and taking people out and all sorts, where, again, like the last time we saw him, I think, kill someone was in the first issue, and it was all that kind of...
He's shocked.
Yeah, and now he's like, well, it's me now. that's who I am now. So he's like accepted that. He's come full circle now, almost, hasn't he?
He's gone from civilian to a soldier. But one small little detail on Roadblock, maybe on a lighter note, that I just want to point out is that he's famous in the Real American Hero universe for being like the cook or the chef. That theme is kind of still carried on. He's the guy bringing in the takeaway sandwiches to feed the troops, when they get a chance to take a rest.
Yeah.
So he's still associated with food, in this particular universe.
He was also in one of the previous issues. He was working as a chef in the diner, wasn't he?
Undercover.
Yeah, and then he had
diner,
he had that kind of fake fight with Lightfoot, which was cool. Yeah, so then obviously this is where it kind of turns into really kind of very dark territory, and we have obviously Tracy's like, I had no idea this was under my skin. They checked her clothing for bugs and stuff, but obviously there was nothing on her. When they scanned her and found it under her skin, it was like, she just had no idea it was there. But unfortunately, they're in a position now where they're being tracked. They have to leave her behind, or they have to kill her, and they're trying to basically come to terms with the decision making here. Frontier's like, look, we don't have a choice, and Fadeaway is desperately pleading with them, saying, no, there must be another way. And Tracy does the sacrificial thing and takes that decision away from all of them, including her friend, and probably more so than her friend, by just running and jumping off the cliff, which is just harrowing, isn't it?
Oh man, this is, like, we get a couple of pages here where this unfolds, and you have that, the crisis of conscience, certainly with Fadeaway. Some of her G.I. Joe colleagues are pretty convinced that they were betrayed, and that Tracy needs to be killed because she knows too much at this stage. And it's a brilliant piece of writing. I mean, Paul Allor has done a superb job
really
dealing with this, yeah. And and the artwork is great as well. The art, Chris brings us into the scene, and then we're coming back. We're getting a bigger view of the group, and we can see how Tracy's kind of out to one side. Fadeaway and Tiger kind of. Tiger's trying to console Fadeaway, who's got the gun, who has to pull the trigger, and then Tracy makes the run. And again, the artwork just pulls back, and we get this, 2/3 page panel, of her leaping off the edge, silhouetted against the moon. I mean, it's just.
What I like is the fact that it's gone. It's the colouring that does a lot here. Like, when everything's nice and fluffy and fine and everything, or they're in the briefing room, it's nice and bright. When Tiger's having his silly chat, it's coloured a certain way. When they go outside, and they're in the kind of cabin and they're keeping a low profile and they get attacked, it's all like very dark. And then obviously when we get to this point, this point of no return, the colouring is again, it's like, that it's done in such a way that it kind of really, it follows the emotion as well. And I think that's just really well done throughout this issue, and the pacing's really smooth. And considering loads has to be said and done in this issue, it's done in such a way that you're not sitting there reading page and page of like backstory about this character or their life together. It's just little quick moments that just give you enough, and then your brain fills the rest in. And like I said in that last panel, or the last panel of the really somber moment, is like, whoa, it's like just so powerful. And so yeah, brilliant. And then obviously we come back to the briefing, and that's where we find out that it was kind of for nothing, because if you didn't think it could get any darker, it goes. And again, this is really good. This is really good because it zips between each character's reaction to what do you mean the package didn't reach its target. And so for Fadeaway, it's like, so all that was for nothing. I did that for, and then it goes on to the next person. It's Frontier, and he's like, why wouldn't you tell us? Why wouldn't you discuss? And Scarlett's like, it was a tactical decision, not subject to field team, not subject to field team approval. And then Roebuck's like, still, that's, he's lost for words. Tiger is saying, please don't tell Fadeaway. And then Jinx is just the complete opposite of all of them, and she is just like incensed, and she's like, what? And then they had this massive argument, and Scarlett just says, right, you're out of the team, and kicks Jinx off the team. Crazy, isn't it?
This is so, I mean, again, just rolling back there a little bit, the first person, as they're all being individually debriefed, and they're all being broken the news that there were a number of field teams in operation, and that they were delivering a decoy. But the first person that we see who gets that news is Fadeaway. And Fadeaway is just finished telling Scarlett the story of how Tracy, had to die. But she tries to find solace in the fact that, well, we delivered our package, so the mission was a success, right? And that's when Scarlett tells her that your package was a decoy, and the actual real package never made it to the target. And then we see all the individual reactions as all the other team members are also being debriefed. But as you say, Jinx takes it like, there's been friction between Jinx and Scarlett from the beginning of this series.
Yeah.
And Jinx just lets Scarlett have it. She tells her the mistakes that were made, the risks that were taken, the losses that were incurred, and all that for nothing, and that this is just not acceptable. And Scarlett says, was that your position, Stink? Are you really that unhappy? Well, then you're off the team. Get the hell out.
Wow. And
just going to say, in this universe, Scarlett's a real a-hole.
Oh, yeah. She's something else, all right. But like, I mean, I think she's just has no sympathy for anybody in this situation. Like she's very cold, but at the same time, I think she kind of needs to be for the team. But there's certain moments you kind of think, bloody hell, Scarlett, like, have some bedside manner there. But then obviously Jinx, then she goes, I can make we can take you wherever you need to go. And she's like, that won't be necessary. I can make my own way home. And she goes to this dojo, and that's where she's like, basically she meets up with another character who hasn't been seen yet in the comic, and it's revealed at the end it's Snake Eyes. Oh my
Snake
God.
Eyes.
And I tell you what,
and he looks bad.
What a design as well, eh?
That is the red sash, the red in the visor. I mean, he just looks fantastic.
I'm really excited to see Snake Eyes in this issue. In the next few issues if we do see him. But it's just a really nice way of kind of separating those people now from G.I. Joe as a thing, because it kind of feels like the Arashikage are separate anyway half the time, that they're doing their own thing. Snake Eyes, Storm Shadow, Jinx, they always seem to be doing their own little mission for G.I. Joe most of the time in the other runs as well anyway, don't they? So I kind of like the fact that the angle that Paul's coming at this is that they're completely separate from G.I. Joe, and they're their own little team. So that's really awesome.
I love that. And it's probably worth noting here too that we have this in the ruined dojo where she meets up with Snake Eyes. There's light cutting through the blinds on the window, and we get to see kind of a highlight across her eyes.
Perfect. Yeah. Probably
mimicking, her mask from her Real American Hero character. And I think we saw a bit of that before when Jinx appeared on one of the covers a couple of issues back as well.
Absolutely, good spot as well. I missed that. I think that's exactly what Chris is attempting to do there, and succeeding. Really good issue. Like it's a funny one because when on the outside looking in, like when I read it the first time, I thought, yeah, that was really solid. Really enjoyed that. Good pacing to it, but I didn't think there was a lot to it. Having gone through it again, I'm like, actually, there's loads in this. Like, they have to get, they have to do the mission. They're doing the briefing. There's the situation where they have to get off the train, and then they have to they get attacked by Cobra, and they have to fight them off. Then they have to make that horrible decision, and then her friend kills herself, and then it's back to the briefing, and they realize the mission's failed, and then Jinx gets kicked off the team, and then Snake Eyes is here, and it's like, wow, they squeezed a lot of information into a very short period of time there.
A good writer has got to be able to take a good story and tell it really, really well, and be really economical with how they get all that information across.
Yeah.
This is a prime example of storytelling at its best in this particular issue here. So, as I say, all the issues for this run are fantastic. I think the guys have just hit another high, and they're setting the benchmark even higher for issue number 7.
Absolutely. We should also, something I actually forgot to mention at the start was the covers. Now, we've obviously got the fadeaway cover where she's on the front of she's basically just looking at her on her laptop, and it's got the little star instead of, say, like an Apple symbol, which I think is genius. And you've got the Cobra, kind of the digital Cobra sigil behind her, like half of it kind of all glitching, which I thought was really cool. Just a beautiful cover, really, in all said and done. I believe that's the standard team, isn't it? That's Chris Evenhuis.
I'm just looking at the credits here. So that is just art by Chris Evenhuis for that standard cover number 1.
Brilliant. Really nice.
So that's everything in that. So there's no Brittany Peer isn't contributing the colours to that particular cover by the looks of it. It's all Chris, but obviously done in a style very faithful to the overall look to this series.
And then the other cover, who's that by the way? The other cover. I don't
Emma Vicelli,
and it's
the art, and then colours by Brittany Peer.
So yeah, we've got Emma Vicelli on the retail incentive cover artwork with Brittany Peer's colours, and that's really cool because obviously that shows the rift between Jinx and Scarlet. You know, the rip down the middle of the page, both of them back to back as well. A very kind of powerful cover that you kind of think on first viewing. You might think, well, what's this got to do with these guys? And then obviously it makes a lot of sense when you get to the end of the issue. It's got everything to do with these two. And now all of a sudden we've got this huge rift in their kind of personalities and their relationship, which has always been like that. There's always been this, as we said before, there's always been this kind of like friction between the two of them, hasn't there? And then it's just come to an end here now with Scarlet kicking her off the team.
I actually love this cover. Sometimes with the RI covers, you get maybe something that's a little bit more maybe playful, not necessarily always connected to the events in the comic. But this here, man, you just said it there, Chris. I mean, this is like the climax of this particular story is when Jinx gets booted off the team, and that's what Emma Vicelli and Brittany Peer have captured right here, is that visceral, literally like someone's ripped a strip from top to bottom out of the cover, and we've got these 2 new factions in play now, where there was just G.I. Joe. Now we have the Arashikage are going to form as a force on their own, and I'm really excited to see where the guys are going to take this.
Sames. Well, let's give it our final potatings, shall we say? Brian, what would you give this one, mate?
No surprises here. Right? I'm going the full 5 on this. I mean, this is 5 out of 5. I mean, it probably needs, maybe a 6 out of 5. I mean, this is a really, really great issue. Just kind of recapping here, it's a simple story, but it's really, really well told and beautifully illustrated and beautifully colored. Top marks for the entire team in this one. It's a magnificent issue.
I have to agree. I think it's really cohesive, nice kind of simple but effective story. Great work again by Paul, Chris and Brittany, and everyone else on the team that are kind of bringing us this comic. Just brilliant stuff. And yeah, like I can't recommend this series enough. We've got issue 7 coming pretty soon as well, so we'll be hopefully we better get on that a bit quicker than we got on this. But
yes.
We'll be jumping on that one pretty soon, and that's an impressive. That's going to be an impressive one as well. So yes, guys, thank you so much, Brian, for jumping on with me and chatting G.I. Joe issue 6.
Love it.
That's it for this installment of the Full Force Comics Burst. Thank you to my awesome co-host Brian Hickey. See you next time, and as always, Full Force. Make sure you get involved with the discussion by liking, sharing and commenting on these videos, and as always you can keep up with the show after listening by following on Twitter @The Full Force, liking the Facebook page facebook.com/The Full Force, and if you would like to contact the show you can message us on either of those platforms with feedback or questions. We have also started a Patreon page, so if you want to see your name up in lights on these videos or enjoy exclusive bonus content, then check out patreon.com/The Full Force Podcast, or click the link on any of the posts this podcast appears in. Full Force. And a big shout out to our sponsors, Distant Planet Comics and Collectibles, located at 601 Business Loop 70 West Suite 263, located in the Parkade Center, Columbia, Missouri. You can visit their website at distantplanetcomics.com and on Facebook at facebook.com/distantplanetcomics.